welcome back to Deconstructing Damsels. Today, we have a guest. We have Becky Feldman from Too Stupid to Live. And I'm really glad because we're going to talk about the book Edge of Survival by Toni Anderson. I picked this book when I asked on Twitter where I could find some diabetic rep because I'm a type 1 diabetic. I talk about it a little bit, but throughout this episode, you'll learn a little bit more about what I've gone through. And what I find interesting is the fact that Miss Anderson has no connection to diabetes, but she did the research she was supposed to do. She did all the stuff that was important, and the book is still 10 years old and relevant in that way. So that's kind of like a good thing and also a bad thing if you're thinking about it medically. I definitely want to call out something here before I start the episode, however. Corey Alexander, also known as Zane West, actually recommended this book as well, or backed the recommendation, I should say. And I picked it for that reason because I've talked to Corey and about all this kind of stuff before, and they were very open and honest, and they helped me with stuff with my diabetic moving, like what I could find to put my insulin in, for instance, for the long flight, because it's a very long flight from Atlanta to Germany. But sadly, Corey passed away in August, and I want to say it's a really sad thing for the community because Corey always was there to help, offer recommendations, support other authors, and I want that to be acknowledged right now, okay? Because I think it's very important to say that Corey and Becky and a few more were like, okay, here's what I enjoy, and I can't help but say thank you for that. And a special thank you to Drew Healy on Twitter for being the first one to recommend this book. Edge of Survival is fantastic, and I think that is something that should probably be acknowledged because I don't really know the person, and it means a lot when you guys interact and you give me options and we kind of communicate. I thank you. Everybody who helped with this, thank you, because it was really important. This is my birthday month, and I wanted to include something that represented me in that moment. I mean, that's very whatever, but okay, whatever. It's my birthday month. Don't care. And I just feel like people maybe don't talk about diabetics as much as we should, so I wanted to kind of clear the air on that. So, on to the episode. I hope you guys enjoy it. I appreciate Becky coming on so much. It was such a gift because I have listened to it forever, which we'll talk about in the episode as well. But carry on with the show, guys. So I have got Becky from Too Stupid to Live, which I love the name. I was actually kind of mad that I couldn't take it. I loved that name so much.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, I feel like I was thinking today, like, Too Stupid to Live is deconstructing damsels, because, like, what you do, I feel like Too Stupid to Live is, like, a type of criticism of damsels. So I feel like this is just, like, kismet that we're finally connecting.
I thought so too, and I was like, because like I remember listening to you when I actually started my podcast, like, because we were all kind of like, you, me, and Boobies and Newbies, Kelly from Boobies and Newbies, we were all kind of like premiering around the same time.
That's right, yeah.
And so I remember that, like, and you guys have just been a lot better about putting out content.
You have to. I mean, it's like, I'm kind of like, as long as you're doing something regularly, no matter what regularly means to you, like, I think it's fantastic.
I may have been taking like 4 months at a time off accidentally. But anyway.
Well, life happens. So, it's all good.
Exactly. Well, and to be fair, like in last year I was working. There were sometimes I was working over 40 hours in a part-time retail job.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So, and it's tiring, and yeah, I hear you. I've had to take, when things get a little hectic, I usually am like, okay, guys, I'm going to take a quick break, but I will be back. Stay tuned.
Exactly. Like, here's what's coming up when I come back.
Yeah.
More books.
Right. Yeah. I'll promise you that. That's one thing I'll promise. It's not going to like suddenly change to like reviews of the Cheesecake Factory or something. So.
I don't know. That may be kind of interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I love that place, but yeah,
So do I.
it's
I
so
used to
good.
get it from oh, what was it? Not Uber Eats, DoorDash. I used to get it
Yeah.
from DoorDash because I lived near the mall right before I
Oh,
moved
perfect. Yeah.
out of Georgia, and so it was literally like a 5 minute thing to get there. And so I'd get the DoorDash because I again working 40 hours a week. I was like I'm not getting in my car and going any further than my house, which was like two
No.
minutes away.
Right. No
And so
way.
so I would order it, and I'd always get like the cheeseburger rolls because I love those. So I'd get
Oh,
the cheeseburger
yeah.
rolls,
Mm-hmm.
and I'd get usually like the steak Diane and stuff like
Oh,
that. So
nice. Yeah.
yeah, I'd get like the I can't remember what else came with it, but there was like a two thing. I was like, look, I'm working hard for my money, and I'm going to enjoy my money, so I want to
Exactly. I
eat
just like
well.
love it where like Cheesecake Factory's like, you know what? Our menu's just gonna be food. We're just gonna have food. You know what I mean? And it's like genius
Exactly.
marketing.
Exactly, and they had like really good food.
It works.
Like
Like, I mean, I know it's not like kind of a farm to table fresh, like, whatever, but like, you know what? Like it hits the spot a little bit. So yeah.
the funny thing is I don't like cheesecake.
Oh, that's a what an irony. Because I love cheesecake.
It's like there's something about the consistency that never works, but they
Oh,
have
I
this
get it.
great like chocolate cake.
Yeah.
Like I think I think it's like chocolate blackout or something. Oh,
Yeah.
I actually miss that living in Germany now. I actually miss that blackout cake because
But German
long.
has like good chocolate though, right? So I'm sure you
Oh
have like
yeah,
better delicacies than like, we do.
oh yeah. Well, I mean, I do. Like we have something called a Richer Sport, which you can
Mm.
actually get in the States in some places, like at
Hmm.
the World Market and stuff. Or
Ooh.
yeah,
That's right. Oh
and
yeah, World Market does sell a lot of good stuff. Okay, anyway, I'm going
yeah.
off tangent.
It's okay. But they have like really they have Richer Sport there, and I love it. Like I had one a while ago that had it's like a milk chocolate, but it's like a darker milk chocolate, and it's got cashew in it.
Ooh, that sounds so good.
Yeah, and they've got like one that's got it tastes almost like if you put it in the fridge, it tastes like Reese's, like the little
Ooh.
Reese cups. But it's called a nougat, and it's so good.
That
And
sounds
like you
good.
can, I only buy it when it's on sale though, because it's kind of expensive. But I'm like, you
Sure.
know what? It's worth waiting for.
Of course, yeah.
My husband actually used to send me some in the mail before I moved over here.
Aw,
He'd pop it in the mail because he'd get like the seasonal stuff that I couldn't get at home, and so he'd
right.
pop it in the mail and give it to me.
That's sweet. That's very sweet.
Because he's the one that introduced it to me when he came over for the first time. So
Right, yeah.
yeah, so it's just like it's kind of nice to kind of have that. It's nice to have that like I'm trying to figure out how to put this. It's nice to have that kind of comfort, and I think that's
Sure.
kind of what like I think that's what the romance community is comfort.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I had a
Like yeah,
guest on who described it so well of cotton candy for your brain, and I've been co-opting
yeah,
that phrase so much, but it's true, especially now when I feel like things are hard. I don't know what process you guys are in terms of reopening in Germany, but LA is still kind of behind, and
yeah,
it's
and on
kind of getting
fire.
to me. Yeah. And so yeah. And so I'm just like, oh yeah, we are on fire. Luckily I'm not in the
Yeah,
danger zone, but it's still like hard to go outside. Like yesterday I went outside to take the trash out and I just like started this like coughing fit.
yeah.
Because there's ash everywhere, but I'm honestly very fortunate to live where I live. But yeah, just like sitting back and being able to like read a romance, especially like in the genres that just like I love, is just it's kind of like right now I'm like, okay, let me get through the day because tonight or whenever I take a break, I'm gonna have my book and it's just I'm gonna have a glass of wine, read the book. It's my self-care.
And relax.
Exactly. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
just been like, yeah, it's like hard to remember to like still find joy during these times. And so allowing myself to just read a book is like helping me just find joy, I feel like I'm sounding
Yeah.
so depressing right now, but like I'm not, but like, you know
No,
what I mean?
I mean, well, like I keep saying at the end of every episode, like the world is on fire, so find joy however you can.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
that's what you have to do. Like the world
Hmm.
is crazy right now. It's like crazy like being in the middle of a fire tornado, right? Like
Yeah. It's
you
hard. And like with the
you can't escape
elections,
it.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's just like, I feel like, I tend to be on Twitter a lot and just get bombarded with just like really dismal news, and it gets to you, and then just like have this, like however long you read a day or a week or a month, just having that break is just, special.
You can kind of like take that moment and just breathe.
Exactly. And like I do
Yeah.
think like people, who maybe consider themselves non-readers are like, "Oh, I should read more. I should read more." But honestly, like it's not a race, you know what I mean? Like read
Yeah.
when you want. Even if you read a paragraph a year, like that's reading. Like don't beat yourself up, you know?
Well, exactly. And like one of my patrons, Dee,
Mhm.
I love Dee. Dee is amazing. Interestingly enough, Dee has become one of my friends.
Mhm.
But along the way, but like, she enjoys books that make her happy,
Yeah,
and sometimes um people can be rude about what she likes and stuff like that, and I'm like,
of course.
why?
Yeah.
Because like Dee is an amazing person. What she reads has no bearing on you.
Mhm.
Like it makes her happy, and that's all that matters. And it's just like with everybody else. Like reading romance for the community is one thing that makes us happy.
Yeah.
Like it makes us, the world doesn't suck in that moment, and it's kind of rare right now. So
Absolutely.
I don't know why anyone would say anything bad about it.
Yeah, I mean, I just like, I'm trying to like pick my battles in that world. Like I feel like people who maybe kind of look down upon romance will then like start talking about Star Wars as if it's the best thing ever, and it's like it's the same fucking thing. Like, like
It's
you're
fandom.
yeah, it's fandom. Like just like I feel like Star Wars is no better than romance novels, and sports is no better than romance novels, and like
Oh yeah.
it's like especially male people are kind of just like picking and choosing like what they consider worthy of reading and watching and whatever, and it's like just because something is about love and you're looking
Hmm.
down upon it because whatever, many reasons, and it's just like, what, at the end of the day, like, am I gonna fight this battle, am I not? Right
Right.
now I'm like, I'm not,
No, like Melinda edits sometimes on Twitter will say that she's all out of spoons, so all she has is knives. And
right.
it's like sometimes there's been times this year I've been like, all I have is knives, so maybe I shouldn't be fighting this battle because
Right,
I
yeah.
don't really think I want to eviscerate anybody today. That's a lot of cleanup and a lot of stuff I don't want to deal with.
I feel
I
like
might as
if
well be
it's
on
like,
Reddit for that.
yeah, like I feel like if it's more important things, like, especially with representation and race and books and stuff like that, I feel like
Yeah.
that's a battle to fight. But I feel like when it's just like one person on Twitter who doesn't, like whatever, but like, if they're poo pooing
Yeah.
something and, you know, sometimes you just got to let them be because you don't want to waste your own energy defending something that's joyful.
Exactly. And it's just like you don't want to take away your time and you could be doing something else with that time. You don't have to waste your time on it.
Yeah, sometimes I'm like, well, the best revenge against people who shit on romance novels is just reading them. You know what I mean? Like that's
Right.
gonna make them angry. Is like you continue reading them, and it's like
And you
it's an
keep
easy
like
thing to
making
do.
and you keep making it like the biggest part of the industry by continuing to read it.
Yeah,
Like your
exactly.
your your area is succeeding because people are like you and they want to enjoy it.
Yeah, like sometimes like, my the greatest thing you can do is instead of like, I don't know, getting on Twitter is just like adding to your Goodreads, like showing everyone on Goodreads what you're reading and just be like,
Yeah.
and then just read. I don't know. I feel like I've been lately. I mean, who knows? Maybe tomorrow I'll get on Twitter and, you know, defend something vigorously. But right now it just like makes me laugh whenever I'm like, oh, you're reading this? Like Mark is reading. I'm doing this, and it just like makes me feel better.
Well, yeah, and it's like I kind of forget about Goodreads because I'm kind of in a war with Amazon right now. But
Right.
it's a war where I don't give them any of my money, so I keep
It's
forgetting
smart.
because
It's
I
so
don't. Yeah.
smart.
Well, I mean, so I had my American account. My American account transferred over to my German account.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is it won't let me buy anything on my German account, even though I have a German bank account.
Oh my gosh. How
Like
annoying.
like nothing I can buy. And
Yeah.
nothing is going through. And so I'm just like, okay, I'm done with you. I don't need to do this.
Right.
There
Yeah.
there are 15 other things. Like over here we have eBay, and eBay works just as well. And I have my Nook. I mean, the
Mm-hmm.
only thing I don't like about my Nook app is the fact that I can't copy and paste.
Oh, wow. Yeah,
which
that
is
sucks.
very difficult when you're writing notes up when you
Yeah,
can't copy and paste.
right.
Like
Yeah.
you can't just like screen cap everything into a Word doc, but
Mm-hmm.
like
Mm-hmm.
so that's why like on my notes for this book, I just have like where my notes were and what they're about so I can go back and find them on the page.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then some of the shorter quotes I have in there, but the
Mm-hmm.
other ones are
Mm-hmm.
just like I have to find it but it's just like, you know, Amazon is a pain in the tush, but it is good for Goodreads. But I want to try. What was it? I think it was Storygraph. Maybe was one
Ooh.
that was
Oh,
new.
maybe I'll look
I
into
can't remember
that.
it. But there was a new one that I think it's in beta.
Mm-hmm.
I know that Miss Bev talked about it.
Oh, cool.
So
Yeah,
a
maybe
while
that's a good
back.
idea. I mean, for my podcast do have to use Amazon, and for me, and I do hate the way they treat their workers and whatever. So
Yeah.
sometimes I'm just like, okay, maybe I'll, use Amazon for this, but maybe in other aspects of my life, maybe I'll start avoiding it and shopping elsewhere. But yeah, it is like this like struggle I have.
I like last year I kind of got annoyed with Amazon too, and I started was it Harlequin? I just went to and bought it through their store, and
That's
then
smart.
their
Yeah, yeah,
app.
yeah.
Well, then their
Mm-hmm.
app because they actually had a really good deal, like you get like money off.
Mm.
So I would get money off, and so I was like, okay, this is cool.
Yeah, good for them. That's great.
Yeah,
Yeah, because I
but
also
then their app died,
oh, that's so annoying.
so they had to get another one, but they just got a new one in, so now
Yeah,
they have an app again. I think it
yeah,
came out like a couple weeks ago.
right. Yeah,
So
I feel like because with my guests, I usually buy the book for them, and because I'm so generous. Oh my god. And so
which is why they're all 4.99 and under, right?
yeah, it's got to be. It's like sorry, like this is the conceit. Sorry, but you're welcome. You're
Yeah.
welcome.
You can read it. See, you're a little bit nicer than I am, but
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I was like, now you have a book. I bought you a book. It's the best present you can have.
welcome to your introduction to romance.
Yeah.
Right?
And they're like, "Oh, so you're gonna buy me the next book, right?" And it's like, come on now.
No,
Yeah,
you got a book.
yeah,
Now you know if you like it, you can continue to read it, or you can find a way around it.
yeah,
If you're
exactly.
really lucky, someone may lend it to you.
Yeah, yeah. Make friends.
Because that's actually how my husband read A Girl Like Her.
Hmm.
We actually that was one of the Patreon episodes, but A Girl Like we recorded it because he's got undiagnosed what we think autism.
Okay.
And so I wanted him to read it because it reminded me so much of him. And
Right.
so I just lent it to him. Of course, to lend it to him, I just let him sign into my account because it wouldn't let me lend it to him because he was in Germany.
Hmm.
I'm like, that's just really silly and
I
dumb.
know. I know.
It's there's like so much like gatekeeping on that. I'm
Yeah,
just
it's
like,
frustrating because it's like if you
but
want to
I bought it.
mimic, yeah, if you want to mimic how people read, people lend books, like do that. You know what I mean?
And that's how you get people that buy other books and other series and
Hmm.
because like when I was in the States, I would thrift so hard on books. I
Hmm.
would get so many like old Harlequins for like 25 cents.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I loved
I
it.
remember,
Yeah. Like going to library sales is just so
yeah.
great. Yeah.
Or like if you can ever find, I don't know about LA, but I know that in I was in Metro Atlanta,
Hmm.
and when I was in Atlanta, if you went to like a lot of the like we called it Potter's House when I was in Barrow, but there's like a Christian organization and you can buy them for like 25 cents.
That's so great.
Any
Yeah.
paperback.
That's
So
awesome.
like
Yeah.
yeah, and so it's like I was like, "Oh my God." And they always had romance. Like romance and cozy mysteries. I was like, "Oh,
Yeah.
I'm in heaven. Thanks. Those are my two genres, my two genres at the moment. So thank
Yeah,
you."
yeah, yeah. I feel like it's like romance is such a, major market in the publishing industry, but it's also such a major thing where when people finish a book, they usually lend it or like, will donate it. I feel like more so
Mhm.
than other books. I don't have any proof of that. I just have a feeling of it. But a lot of like it's always like mass market paperbacks and it's just like
Yep.
they're so readily available, whether it's in the library or online or even, at garage sales or, for me, library sales. There's always this huge plethora of books, which is fantastic. And yeah.
And filling the bag or filling the boxes are the best ones
Oh,
ever.
sure. Yeah, you just gotta like sit on the floor and go through them, and it's just like a fun way to like spend your time.
I don't even do that. I'm so like I'm kind of shallow in the way I'll go by book cover.
Everyone does, yeah. Of course, this
Well,
is
I go
romance.
by well, yeah, but I go by book cover, but I go by the ones that actually don't have the guys in the kilts. I go
Yeah,
by the ones that have the women in like the odd positions, and I'm just like, I like this. This is gonna be odd.
yeah.
I mean, that's how I got like some of my Christmas books last year. I went to there's a place in Lawrenceville, Georgia called Liberty Books,
Hmm.
and they were actually part of Romance Day, like
Yeah,
Romance in a
yeah.
Bookstore.
Hmm.
Um, I'm actually the one that told them about it. I'm bringing
Cool.
this up for a reason because I went in there and like they have a whole room of nothing but romance books almost.
Oh,
Like and it's like it's a small store, but it's like an entire room.
that's awesome. That's so great.
Yeah, it's crazy. And so I'm like, I like this. This
Yeah.
is why more people should go. And like I think that when you find books that and like they have like really good deals and like if you bring them back like so many back you get like a credit, you get like a 25 or 50 cent something credit.
Oh,
So every time you
great.
bring a book back you get a credit, so if
Hmm.
you bring back your books every time you at least get some money off on your on like the next couple books you get.
Fantastic. I love that. Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
that's what makes them affordable,
Right.
and
Yeah.
some of them are used and some of them are not, but they're like they're I saw so many Claypus there.
Oh, yeah.
Like they literally had a whole shelf of her.
Yeah, she's a lender. Yeah.
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 And so I'm just like, or apparently a seller. Uh,
Yeah, yeah, that too. Yeah,
yeah.
obviously. Yeah.
But like, I mean, like they sold them back and then but like, I, she's not necessarily my favorite, but I
Right.
can definitely see the appeal.
Hmm.
And I was just really glad to see they had such a variety because they had nothing but like an entire like back row of like the Harlequin books,
Hmm.
like all the series.
That's great.
Yeah. And like they have like the ones that like they have sales and stuff like that. So you can buy like if you buy two, you can get one with like, like you get like a third off of all of them or stuff
Right.
like
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
So
yeah.
it's really cool. And
Yeah.
I bring it up because it's like I think sometimes people assume that we all just buy it brand new and then just like discard it instead of like finding a home for it,
Right.
finding a home for the books. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I like it when people read romance because I think they learn a lot about themselves when they read it.
Sure. Absolutely. It's very eye-opening, of what makes it, what makes good sex, what makes a good relationship, what makes a good like kind of way to improve a lot more aspects of your life in terms of being brave and sticking up for people and doing what's right. Like it's more than just sex, even though a lot of it is sex and yeah.
Yeah. And it's also like it's good for finding representation, I think sometimes better than a lot of other fiction.
Absolutely. Yeah, I feel like so many authors are doing such a fantastic job of bringing in, representation and, with race, with sexuality, and with, health and all of these things. I think it's fun to learn. For me, it's fun to learn about diversity through a genre that I love. You know what I mean? And
Exactly.
yeah,
I mean, like I said, I learned a lot about learning a lot about Ruth taught me a lot about my husband. I
right.
didn't expect it, but it was a beautiful gift to me
Mm-hmm.
because it's something that I understood, and I thought Ruth was a strong character, and I don't mean like the like 10 years ago strong, but like strong as in strongly written, strongly defined,
Correct. Yeah.
strongly sketched out, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
they don't always get like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
sometimes the characters can feel a little bit light, but
Oh,
she did
sure.
not.
Yeah.
And then I thought that was really good, and I was like, okay, so that's something I hadn't experienced. And I'm white, white.
Uh-huh.
So it's not my experiences being, someone black in the UK. So
Right.
I learned about that as well.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
learned about how things may be that I would
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily know, and I found an author that I love.
Yeah.
So
It's
it
great.
pays
Yeah.
off.
Mm-hmm.
It just take a little chance and you can find a whole lot of information about yourself without knowing it. What
Absolutely.
you know or don't know, as it
Mm-hmm.
turns out. And like I asked about the reason that I picked this book. Oh, I should mention, we're doing Edge of Survival
Uh-huh.
by Toni Anderson. And I did it because I asked on Twitter, asking for people that were diabetic, because I'm a diabetic,
Hmm.
and you never see that in books, and I'm like, but why?
Right.
There's so many people that are diabetics, like, and type 1 and type 2 are very different.
Hmm.
And I'm type 1, so I'm like the character Cam in this book. And so I was like, but I want to find me, I want to see me, I want to be in front of something, right?
Yeah.
Even though I'm not at all like her, I don't have the same things. We have a lot of shared experiences.
Oh, that's
And
cool. Yeah,
yeah,
that's awesome because I was curious as to how much, her experience resembles a lot of other people. I'm not diabetic, and so I'm just curious
yeah.
as to like how her experiences and what she does and how
It's
she's responsible every
very
fucking
good.
day. I was just
It's
curious.
very on point.
That's
Um,
awesome.
and I actually emailed the author about this
Oh, well, what did she say?
about a
She's
month
my,
ago.
by the way, she's my favorite author of all time, and yeah, and that's why I'm like, I love this
She's
book.
she's amazing. Like,
Hmm.
because I was writing to her, I was like, well, how do you know about this? Because this is not something that most people write about or know about. And
Yeah,
she said, I'm not diabetic, but she did a lot of research. She read message boards, she read people's experiences, she got the ideas. Like, she put the time and effort into understanding the disease. And
yeah,
I was like, she nailed it.
absolutely.
Because
Yeah, that's fantastic.
as a diabetic, I never see that. Like, everyone's like, either they're gonna like kill themselves because they're suddenly a diabetic and their life is different and blah blah blah, and not. Because
Right.
I was diagnosed when I was 22. Yeah, I was
Hmm.
22, almost 23, so I always get that confused. But I was 22, and I didn't know I was a diabetic until I went to the hospital, and they said, by the way, your blood sugar was like, I think it was like 600 and something.
Hmm.
It's normally supposed to be around like 140 after you eat,
Oh, wow.
or 100 when you wake up.
Yeah.
So I was actually put in a coma.
Oh my
I was a medically
God.
induced coma for
Wow.
36 hours trying to get my
Jeez.
sugars down.
Oh.
And I had a diabetic ketoacidosis, which is what she worries about
Hmm.
sometimes in here. That's why
Yeah.
she does all the exercising and the dieting and stuff. She doesn't want to go back. She doesn't want to do it because it can
Sure.
literally kill you.
Yeah.
It's actually one thing that can kill a diabetic very quickly. And so I was listening to her. I was like reading about it, and I say listening, but I was like listening to what I was getting in the email. And I was going through, and I was like, okay, but this actually makes sense.
Hmm.
Because there was a line in it that says it was a juggling act, insulin, diet, and exercise, and it ended with your last breath.
Yeah.
And that's very true. Like,
Yeah.
I have to give myself a shot. So I have to take the long term and the short term, which she mentioned in the book. I have to take the long term twice a day. I can't take it once a day.
Hmm.
My body actually goes into basically like diabetic shock, and I get down to like the 20s of my blood sugar,
Uh-huh.
which is very bad.
Yeah.
And so I have to take it in the mornings, and I have to take, like, whenever I eat, I have to take my short term, and I have to
Hmm.
constantly monitor and all this stuff. And I'm over here now, and one reason I was glad to move here instead of the other way around was I my insulin is cheaper here,
Hmm.
somewhat cheaper. Different, like in the U.S. I got vials. Over here I get pens.
Hmm.
But my test strips are free.
Oh, cool.
So, and that's like the most expensive thing outside of the insulin,
Right.
is always the test strips. Because like I used to get the Walmart ones, and it was like $20, I think, for 100,
Hmm.
and you use like at least 3 a day. So
Yeah.
you can see where that wouldn't last.
Yeah.
And I had insurance through my job, but with my job, I can only get my stuff through my stores or the company's pharmacies.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, I don't want my company to have access to that information.
Right. Yeah.
That's 18 kinds of no. But luckily, I was going to because I didn't make a lot. Last year was the first year I actually made enough I could have maybe survived on. But before that, I had very short hours because they were short changing because retail.
Hmm.
And so I was going to a clinic that was actually giving me like $10 a vial instead of the, like, I think one of them last time I checked was, I think the Lavamere was something like $700 a vial.
Mm-hmm.
And then my Humalog was like, I think somewhere around like 500 a vial.
Oh, wow.
At one point I was paying around, because I didn't have insurance for a very long time.
Right.
Until the ACA, I didn't have insurance, and I was having to pay like $200 a vial
Oh, that's terrible.
in 2013, and I
Jeez.
cried because I took my medicine to school one
Yeah.
time,
Mm-hmm.
and I just got it, and the vial broke.
Yeah, I had that happen to a friend of mine, and it just was like, ugh.
It's like heartbreaking. It's
Yeah.
scary. You
Sure.
don't know what's going on,
Mm-hmm.
and like I wanted people to understand that fear.
Yeah.
I mean, not like in a, like, I want you to be afraid, but understand that there's a reason why people want to see representation of themselves in that way, because it's like we go through that every day, but we still look for love, we still look for life, we still look for success.
Yeah,
It
absolutely.
doesn't stop us. It just
Yeah.
makes it different.
Yeah.
And I think
Absolutely.
sometimes they miss that.
Right. Yeah. It's kind of just like this afterthought. But I thought the author did a really good job because I think she has one line where she's like, this is every day. I have to do this every day. It's not, I haven't struggled. I struggle, or whatever. And I
Yeah.
just was like, oh, that's really smart. And it just reminded me, it's not the same thing, but like a lot of people who are immunocompromised, with
Hmm.
like, whether it's celiacs or Crohn's or, something like that, like it is, you have to do this every day. And,
It's a balance.
it's a balance. And I think like I have so much respect for people who just have to do what they can, and they have to deal with, I don't know, just like whether it's going to restaurants or, going to parties with friends. And, I just have so much respect for people who just like have to think about these every little thing that I never think about, and yeah.
It's really hard. And there's another line in the book where it goes, or going to sleep at night, never sure you're going to wake up the next morning.
Yeah, I mean it's insane. And
I've had that
yeah.
happen.
Oh, yeah.
Like my husband, at the time he was my fiance, he had someone from Twitter call 911 from another state to come to my house because I was non-responsive
Oh my God. Oh my
when I went to
God.
sleep. And it happened twice
I'm
within
so
2 weeks.
sorry. That's
And
terrible.
I mean, thankfully I was responsive enough, like my body wasn't completely dead,
Hmm.
but it was low enough that it took them like half an hour to bring me back.
Oh my
To
God.
bring me to a functioning level because my
Yeah.
sugars were so low.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
I was working a schedule that my body couldn't handle.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so I was like, I can't do this anymore. I told my people, I was like, I know you wanted me to be the morning person. I was fine with being the morning person. My body won't let me be the morning person if you're going to have me close the night before. Like, I have to have a fairly consistent schedule. It's like, it's a medical need now.
I think that's fantastic. Like, I think like that's one of the reasons, that's another thing why I have so much respect for people, because it's like we live in a world where, especially in the States, like everything is about our job. We sacrifice so
Mhm.
much for our job, and it does affect our health. It does affect our relationships. And the fact that like you were able to put yourself first in that situation, I find so admirable.
I had to, like, I mean, I
Yeah.
had to keep the job,
Hmm.
but I also knew that like I couldn't afford to die because my husband again was in Germany and I was here, and I would go to sleep with Skype on every night, and
Hmm.
until his tablet died, we would be he would watch me sleep, or he would like be there, so if I needed to call him he could be there.
Yeah.
And we did that because literally I was scared to go to sleep by myself in my house.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Because I would wake up with diabetic seizures like she had. I
Yeah.
would wake up with those fairly often sometimes,
Oh,
depending
yeah.
depending on how stressed I was. My stress was a main factor, and if I was overly stressed, I would wake up like that all the time
Yeah. Yeah, yeah,
and drink
yeah.
like 4 apple juices and like I'd get the apple sauce pouches.
Mhm. Mhm.
I would get those because I could twist those off and just eat them.
Yeah.
Twist the top off and eat them like the ones like the kids have. And so I was like,
Mhm.
yeah, yeah. And I used to get the ones because I worked for the company.
Uh-huh.
They had ones that were dessert ones.
Ooh.
So it's like apple pie, apple strudel, stuff
Yeah.
like that.
And it's just like there's just cinnamon in it, and yeah.
Yeah, well no, like they actually did taste like apple strudel and stuff.
Ooh.
Yeah. But like I would get it and I would be like, okay,
Yeah.
this is good. but it would just be, it was very difficult for a while to find that balance. And when I was working those 40 hours weeks, that would happen sometimes, and I would call for, I was living with someone at the time,
Mm-hmm.
and I would call for them and they didn't hear me
Oh,
because
wow.
my voice wasn't loud enough to be heard through the door.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I get it. Like, I understood why Daniel was scared, but I also understood why Cam was just like, I can't not live.
Right.
Like, and I'm not your responsibility. I want your help, but I'm not your responsibility. I'm not someone that's fallen apart, that's, this person that can't survive.
How did you feel about the way Daniel was like taking care of her? Like, once he found out, he's like, "Did you eat? Did you take your insulin?" Like, did you find that like overbearing, or were you like, "Oh,
I
that's pretty
did.
sexy"?
I kind of like, I thought it got to be a little bit overbearing at some
Right.
points
Yeah.
because he stopped listening to what she was saying, I think. He was
Yeah.
so inside his head he forgot that, like, she's had it since she was 14. She's had it for over 10 years at this point.
Hmm.
She knows what her body can handle.
Yeah, that's what I was curious about because it was like, oh, to an outsider, it seemed like, oh my God, he's so into her that he's taking care of her. But then there were times where it was just like, he's not her dad. You know what I mean? And it's like,
Yeah.
but it was like nice to see him learn because I do feel like I tend to do this too, where it's like you're so overbearing. Like, are you okay? What can I do? What can I do? What can I do? And
Hmm.
like, you don't realize that you're kind of being overbearing to someone. Like, I have very specific experiences where I did that, and sometimes I still deal with like that guilt that I have of like, oh, I was being too much. But it's a
But it comes from a
it's a
good
learning
place.
curve. Yeah, yeah.
And I mean, and like, I can only speak for me, but like, if I know it's coming from a good place, I can be snippy about it, but I can appreciate it at the same time.
That's good.
Like, I'm
Yeah, that
like,
makes me
I'm
feel
like,
better.
okay,
Yeah.
it's like, my, like, my agency is being taken away from me somewhat in this point. So
Sure.
I'm getting snippy about it, but I can also appreciate the fact that, like, you're trying to help. You're not
Yeah.
doing it to be annoying. You're doing it because you
You care.
care.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and that caring does matter, especially
Hmm.
if you're like, like I said, I can only say for me, but like for me as a diabetic, it means a lot when someone puts that into effect.
Right.
Like at my job,
Hmm.
there was a lot of people that were aware of what was going on, and so they would keep an eye out for me, like, because my sugars would go low a lot at work too,
Hmm.
because we didn't have the manpower for me to stop.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
I felt like my job was on the line if I didn't do something. So like I would be like one eye squinted open, picking someone's order or taking out an order or whatever,
Uh-huh.
like almost about ready to fall over. And
Yeah.
so people would hear me, they would hear me sound drunk, and they knew that my sugars were low. And they'd be
Hmm.
like, no, go sit down. And I was very lucky also at one point, one of my co-managers was a diabetic.
Hmm.
So
Oh,
when
that's
he
yeah.
heard me, he told me to sit down.
That's great.
Like because at one point my sugars were sky high and I could not get them down.
Hmm.
And so I just was like mainlining like liters of water. Just I think I drank like a liter and a half of water in like an hour.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
You
And
gotta
so
do what you
like,
gotta do.
well, yeah, but I was still on the clock, and my boss let me stay on the clock. And
Hmm.
he also, like, because I was training someone that day to
Right.
close.
Yeah.
And so he let me train while sitting down. I trained her on what to do. I was sitting over in the corner, and we're not supposed to, but he realized that I needed to train at the same time I needed to recover
Yeah.
because he didn't know what to do, so he couldn't train her to do the job.
Right.
So he realized that this was the best solution for both of us, and he understood in that moment. I was like, I have to go sit down. I'm like, I'm in the 300s. This is bad. And
Yeah.
he's like, yeah, no, this is bad. So he went and let me sit over there. And then I was low a couple times. And I told him, and he was like, okay. And he went and got me, like, he'd go get me a Gatorade, or he'd get me something, like he would help me
Hmm.
because he realized what I was saying was, if I tell you that, I must be in a bad position because I try to do everything on my own anyway.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's great for your, manager, that, yeah.
I understood where Daniel was coming from, but I also thought that he was a little bit too overbearing about it
Yeah.
sometimes.
It's like, yeah, yeah. He was a little overbearing. And he was also going through his own stuff too,
With his
of like,
PTSD,
he
oh
had,
yeah,
yeah, PTSD and just like so much guilt about
alcoholism.
alcoholism. And, with the PTSD of just like this guilt of, it was due to people that have died more or less on his watch. And so
Right.
you can kind of understand where he's coming from of like he doesn't want to lose another person. And
Yeah, like, you definitely understood where the overbearing came from.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
It just sometimes he went a little bit far with it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Like overriding a bit. In the pivotal scene
Mm-hmm.
of the book, what he did was fantastically smart and proper.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
was exactly what she needed. In that moment, that's exactly what she needed for that to survive.
Yeah,
So
because he like
he did the right
saw.
thing.
Yeah, he like noticed and was like kind of read,
Hmm.
you know, based on like, oh, okay, like this is what she needs to do. And he didn't like take it on his own accord. Like there was a level of like listening there, even though he was, you know what I mean? Like he was,
Yeah.
oh, there was an awareness and a listening and trusting her of what she was doing, and saved her
He
life.
finally realized that she knows what's happening,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's okay to back up, because like sometimes my husband and I have arguments about about
Yeah.
me,
Mm-hmm.
and like Sven is probably the best partner I could ever have, and it has
Uh-huh.
nothing to do with him. It just has to do with the fact that how I am,
Sure.
like,
Yeah.
because I have PTSD somewhat.
Mm-hmm.
I have like a low level of it because I had diabetic acidosis twice, once in
Right.
2004 and 2012.
Mm-hmm.
And in 2012, I had it because I couldn't afford my medicine anymore, and I was living on doctor samples.
Oh, wow.
And there's been enough stories in the news. We know what happens to diabetics when that happens.
Yeah.
And so I literally went into DK. I was in the hospital for 10 days.
Ugh.
Yeah, I was in the medical ICU for 5 of those days, trying to
Mm-hmm.
balance me back out.
Yeah.
And so it, like, the first visit was 5, so it was like even double that. So it was this whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, there's just a level of fear, and I don't think that maybe he understood that she almost had her own version of that.
Yeah.
That's why she was so controlled about everything,
Mm-hmm.
because she knew, she had read, she had seen, she was aware, she was a scientist. So
Mm-hmm.
she knew what would happen if she ever brought it down, because I've never had an A1C at a 5 or a 6. Like,
Right.
the lowest I've ever had is a 7.0, which is
Mm-hmm.
not high, but it's not right either. Like, it should be like a
Sure.
6.5 or down.
Mm-hmm.
Like, my last one was a 7.3, which that's about where I tend to middle at.
Yeah.
Looking at all my previous ones from the past couple years from my doctor's office, when I moved, I got all my records,
Mm-hmm.
and that's about normal.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh, so she's doing a really good job. So obviously he really should be listening to her.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like one thing that probably would have helped him is if he had found a way to get information about diabetes outside of her too, like,
Yeah. Like he
actually
does have
do a
that
little
part.
bit of Roma's,
Right.
do a
Yeah.
little
He
bit
did.
more research into it. Yeah,
He did have that part where they were gonna have sex in the lake. Well, they did, and
yeah,
he, you know, was like, "Here are your waiters," like, or whatever.
yeah.
I'll carry you. But yeah, he could have done like even more. Like that was like, okay, you get an award for that, but you know, you're not like man of the year because you like looked up one thing. You know what I mean?
Right,
And so
exactly.
yeah,
Like, look up, like,
like everything, you
yeah.
know, everything.
I I loved this book. Like,
Oh, it's so good.
I was
Yeah.
so into this book. Like, and there's actually one scene, the scene when Daniel and Vicky have that moment at his door.
Hmm.
The scene that it reminded me of, if it reminded me of The Cutting Edge when Doug and Lori are hooking up.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Like, my
Yeah.
entire brain was like, "Oh my God, it's this one scene."
It is. Yeah. It was a very. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it was exactly like I just substituted the characters in the same scene. I was like, yeah,
Sure.
no.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I love The Cutting Edge. It's one of my favorite movies.
Oh, it's
So
classic. Yeah.
it's like, oh yeah, like topic.
Yeah.
Yeah. But like I could see that in my head of it being kind of one of those situations of
Hmm.
empty hookup and then trying to avoid what could be going on.
Yeah. But I did think the author did a good job of like addressing Vicky in terms of
Yeah.
like she wasn't just like this like she like I thought that Toni did a good job of like making her sympathetic in terms of she is dealing with alcoholism. She's self-esteem issues. It wasn't just like this like kind of surfacey
Sex pot.
sex pot who was like the Cam antithesis. You know, it was
Exactly.
she did a good. I don't know. I like the way she was
had a lot of
framed.
good layers.
Absolutely, yeah.
And she was obviously she was also very clearly a girl's girl when it came to Cam. Like, she was trying to look out for her.
Mm-hmm.
Like, she may have gone about it the wrong way a couple times, but she was honestly trying to look out for her friend, and you can tell that.
Yeah, absolutely. And Cam was looking out for her too, and they had a really good friendship. And I think, like, in the wrong hands, it would have not been a good friendship, you know. And I feel like I loved the nuances. I mean, I love the nuances in, like, every one of Toni's books. Like, they're so smart, and the characters are so well written, and yeah.
Now it's time for my mid-break shout out to my patrons Dee, Carrie, and Marlena. I want to say thank you guys so much. All your help pays off, and I want to also give a quick sneak peek that soon you will find more information on Patreon about something coming your way. I'm not going to give it a heads up because where's the fun in that? You guys have to wait. But if you guys want to, please join at patreon.com/damselspodcast if you guys aren't already in the group, because then you don't get a shout out. And you guys want a shout out, right? So, Advanced TV Her Story had this to say about the podcast: refreshing old stories and characters. Smart, well-reasoned, and timely analysis of what we've read and need to read to help us become better feminists. If this was a class you could have taken in college, you would have, with your best buds. Thank you so much. That means a lot, and I definitely know Advanced TV Her Story, and if you guys haven't checked it out, you should, because it's really cool to see how women have impacted TV and what we consume and how we consume it. Kind of like the podcast, right? It's an amazing introduction because I've never read her before, and I was just like, oh no, I really like this. Like, I really like the way this story is laid out. Like, sometimes I felt the romance was actually taking a back seat, which was, fairly normal for me. So I just kind of like, oh no, this is good for me. It's better for me this way.
Yeah.
Because to me, the romance is more about how does it affect the woman necessarily than some of the like the sex and stuff like that, which I talk about on this podcast all the time.
Sure.
It's no big surprise there.
Of course.
But like I like the fact that Cam was confident in her limits. Like that scene when she had the low sugar right after sex. I've had that happen. It's a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
But it happens, and you just accept it, move on, and fix it, right? Like,
yeah, and that's what she did. And you know what I loved about it was just, like, her quickly accepting of, like, okay, I was vulnerable. This was a vulnerable moment. I wish it didn't happen, but it did. This is me. She didn't run away, unlike Daniel, who, when he had a flashback in a dream, he, pushed her away. And, like, I just think it adds... Yeah. Like, and I think it did a good job of showing how weak he was, and conversely how strong she, how just, like, sure of herself she was, even though she had her issues with opening herself up to love and thinking she was falling too fast due to the fact that, like, she had previous engagements. But she was just like this woman who struggled so much but still was able to stand on her 2 feet. And it was so great.
She was an absolutely amazing character, I think.
Yeah.
And she was very stimmy, but she wasn't, like, obnoxiously so.
Yeah.
Like, she was just very confident in what she knew.
Yeah, and she also, like, cared. I think, I think Toni used to be a marine biologist, so there's a lot of, like, animals and marine biology in, like, a lot of her books, which to me is so, like, is equally as interesting. And
stands out.
It stands out. It really does. And, and a lot of her females are just, like, fun, like, fun scientists where they're just, like, studying random, like, one of my favorite books that she wrote is Cold in the Shadows. I highly recommend it. And the main character is, like, a frog biologist or something. and so it's just fascinating to hear, like, facts about frogs. Like, she was studying frogs that, like, have this, like, lethal poisoning that can be used to assassinate people, which is like kind of one of the mystery plot of that book, and it's like,
Yeah.
oh, I love it. Yeah, it's so good.
Well, and I like the fact that like Cam's science background and her science, because she was studying fish migrations,
Mm-hmm.
because it was a mine. To explain this to the listener, sorry.
They'll figure it out.
that there was a mine, and so she was trying to make sure that a dam wouldn't change the trajectory of the fish, and it was, going to be good for, the area and
Mm-hmm.
so forth and so forth. And I think one of the things that I really liked about the suspense was it was two levels, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like there wasn't just one suspense. There was like two things happening.
Yeah.
And so you didn't always know who was doing what.
Yeah, I thought the twist was really interesting. There's a part of me that's like, oh, here's a guy who's like native to the land and he ends up being the bad guy. Sorry, spoiler alert, but whatever.
Yeah.
But I did think it was like her twists are very interesting, and some you kind of see coming, others you don't. There's always something
Yeah.
surprising that happens in her books, and I thought that was particularly surprising. And I think what was interesting is that like Cam is pulled in different directions professionally. Like she's doing this because a company wants to build a mine, but she also wants to protect this land for the people who live there. And
Right.
she like, does like this, like I don't know, I just like thought that like when they find the Wolverine and she's like, okay,
Yeah.
this land can't be, you can't have a mine here. She just like I don't know, like I feel like we need more people like that in the real world, and so that's why I was like
Yeah, and for the book to be like 10 years old, it doesn't feel like it's 10 years old.
no,
Right?
not at
It
all.
feels
Yeah.
very current.
Yeah.
Even with all the changes that go through science and with all this stuff, there's obviously very clear.
Hmm.
There's a very clear guideline. It doesn't feel. It's not like sometimes when you read like a contemporary from like 1999,
Yes.
and you can tell it's 1999. You're
Uh-huh.
just waiting for she's all that flashback.
Yeah.
But you don't feel that. It
No.
feels a lot more. I don't want to say timeless, but a lot more longevity in the and how far you can take it, considering the way environmentalism is going right now.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it just goes to show, I mean, like this is a long running battle, and like we need to, I don't know, like I obviously am proving myself very progressive, and it's like, oh, we need to realize that some of these issues have been long running, and yeah, it was, yeah, like agreed, like it was like very timely in like so many respects, in terms of representation, in terms of climate change, in terms of building on indigenous lands, or corporations sacrificing people's homes for profit. Like it's obviously something that we're still going through, and
especially
yeah.
First Nation.
Of course.
First Nation,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, like there's a lot of commonality that stretches back for quite a few hundred years on that
Yeah,
one.
sure.
And it's not just like this is set in Canada, I should say, but it's the same thing down here in the U.S., right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
Indigenous people are still forced to fight for their right to exist.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and that's one thing I like to think about Cam was you could watch her progression go from to woof,
Yeah.
and like you can watch her shift a little bit in that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it
And
definitely.
I think that's
yeah,
fantastic.
yeah. It is so good, and it's like I think a lesson we all especially like white people should be aware of, and yeah, there are so many aspects to this book that were so timely, and yeah.
Well, and the fact that I will say this, I also like the fact that there was no shame in sex in this book for the most part. I mean, there
Yeah.
were some obviously characters that did, but the overall arc in the book was no shame for sex.
Yeah, because when she wants sex, she's like was like, I want sex, and like
literally that she literally said
says
consensually,
that.
I want it. I want sex now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like this is what I want. I'm telling you openly and clearly.
Mm-hmm.
And well, I mean, even in the case of the prostitute that was killed, sex
Right.
worker that was killed,
Mm-hmm.
there was no shame and speaking to the parents, and when the cop spoke to the parents, when the Mountie spoke,
Hmm.
there was no shame in what she had been doing,
No, yeah, it was very
right? Like
non-judgmental.
your
Yeah.
your child is your child no matter what. I'm not going to take that away from you, and I'm not going to degrade her, and I'm not going to deride her profession, because no matter what, it's what it was, what it was,
Yeah.
and it has no bearing on this anymore.
Yeah, I mean, a person is dead, and no matter what they do, there
Hmm.
is someone who is tragically and horrifically murdered. And yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and it's really nice to see that.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
And I thought that it was unexpected sometimes in some contemporary romances.
Hmm.
Sometimes authors can fall back on um, old biases.
Yeah, yeah. It just reminded me of did you read The Kiss Quotient? I can gush about that.
I actually haven't, no.
It's very good. I feel like it does a good representation of people who have Asperger's, but also in terms of kind of like getting rid of the stigma against like sex workers. I felt like kind of 1%, maybe it was a little judgmental, but and it's such a recent book, and I think,
Yeah.
again, we're still, coming around to awareness of different professions and why we shame them and why we shouldn't, and but we're getting there, and I feel like
Right.
it's shown through these books of just providing humanity to people that in real life we haven't, and it's great. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree, and I was very pleasantly surprised, considering, because it is 10 years old, of a 10-year-old book, and
Hmm.
romance has leaps and bounds and leaps beyond that since
Hmm.
then. And so it was very nice to see that already in the books, because this is one of her first books, I think. So
Yeah,
it
yeah,
was
yeah,
really
yeah.
nice to see that movement, that forward movement. And
Hmm.
I was actually really glad that you said you would come on the episode, because you did like the book, and you were very clearly positive about it. And I
Hmm.
was very excited to see that, because I read it and I was just like, this is an amazing book. I want to talk about this book.
Yeah. I when
And I've
I
never talked about romance suspense before, by the way.
Oh, because like my genre is romantic suspense. I love it's my favorite, and I think what Tony does so well is the mix between the suspenseful plot and then the romantic plot, and there's a good balance, which in turn makes the sex scenes like and the romance like feel just so real, and like she does a good job of like waiting for the right moments for each
Yeah.
specific plot point. And I also think like for me what makes a
And
good
build up.
and build up, yeah, that's the word. Like
Yeah.
for me what makes a good romantic suspense is as you're reading you're thinking, oh my god, how the fuck are these people gonna end up together? And it's like
Uh-huh.
almost stressful to you, and you just and it keeps you just like going through the pages and reading, and it just like I like being on the edge of my seat when I'm reading, and just that she like I think like what she really does is just raise the stakes so well of what is working against these characters being
Yeah.
together. So ultimately when they get together, it is just so triumphant and like romantic, and you don't need the epilogue, you have the happily ever after, which is great.
And and that's exactly what it was with this one. Like, there really wasn't an epilogue. Like,
Yeah.
it ended in a way that you saw this as their happily ever after. You saw how it happened, why it happened,
Hmm.
but it was worth it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there was a scene when they were doing the trying to convince the miners that they were a couple or whatever in the back of that
Yeah.
room, and I was like, that's a really hot scene.
Oh my God.
It
Yeah.
was it was like, and it was hot in the way of the intimacy in that moment, like
Hmm.
the intimacy between them, but also the intimacy in the room itself. The surrounding, this setting was really strong.
Yeah, it was like some major heat just with him, like they're making out and then he's like, "Okay, I'm going to like unbutton your shirt to like really or unzip your pants so you can not like or whatever, but like just mess up your clothes to show." And it was like
Exactly.
it was funny, but there was also so much like heat packed in that, and
Yeah,
yeah.
and you could definitely tell that they were trying not to be attracted to each other, but she was more willing to accept the fact it was happening. Like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
attraction is a thing that happens. There's nothing wrong with it. Let's see what happens. Like, she told him, she's like, it can be just sex. We don't have to have a relationship. But
Yeah.
that doesn't mean that I have to be a one night stand either. We can go back for more sex.
Yeah,
It's okay to put
absolutely.
up that boundary line.
Yeah. You know what? And like just thinking now, like I feel like sometimes in books where a woman gets rejected, not in romance, but maybe other things where she looks kind of pathetic, of
Yeah.
like, oh, this poor sad woman or whatever. But she doesn't make there's nothing making you pity Cam. Like you're
Nope.
like if she gets rejected, it's like, oh, that sucks for Cam, but you know what? Like fuck the other person, as opposed to us being like, oh, poor Cam, she got rejected. It was so
Right.
great. Yeah.
And she's aware that she looks awful the day after he dumps her. But
Hmm.
she's also like, okay,
Yeah.
whatever.
Hmm.
Like, okay, you guys know that we were boning. I mean, we're on a ship. You can't exactly hide that.
Yeah, everyone knew. And which that was like so fun too, of just like there wasn't that plot of like, oh, we gotta hide. It was just like, yeah, we're having sex, none of your business. Let's move on and do our job.
Right. And when things happened, and like when the older guy broke his leg, I think
Hmm.
it was, yeah.
Yeah.
And he had to go off boat for a while so he could heal. And in that time they got closer.
Hmm.
And it was good that they got closer, and like, she found something for everybody to do. But when they weren't listening, Daniel stepped up, and he was riding that alpha male line at that moment.
Yeah.
The only time I ever thought he really crossed it was when he went too far. Like, he went so far in his head that it was jarring for the romance side,
Yeah.
because you were just like, okay, no,
I mean,
just step back a little bit,
yeah.
just a tiny bit.
I mean,
We don't we don't need a love and hip hop character, so
right.
knock it down a notch.
Yeah. I mean, what's so great is that in the end he escapes jail, which is like
Hmm.
this book is like very grounded, in a way. And I feel like being able to like have like the ability to like escape prison is like so
Yeah,
wild, even though it's really happened, but like in
yeah,
this world where whatever, and like he manages to do it. He's able to like he could be put away for jail for forever, and
right.
he does not let that get in the way of getting to Cam. And I'm like, oh, that's so romantic.
And it was realistic in that, because they were so remote.
Hmm.
Like, where they were, there were not that many ex-military guys that could go find her as quickly as he did.
Yeah, absolutely. And he was also like forthright of like, she's diabetic, guys. Like, this isn't, the stakes are much higher than you think. Like, she can die. And like,
Right.
just was like, I don't care about the felony charges I'm about to get arrested for. Like, well, I mean, he doesn't in the end, but
Right.
like, he just puts so much on the line for her. And you really see, because he's haunted by his PTSD.
Oh yeah.
He's
And
really
validly
damaged,
so.
and
And
validly
and
so, and like it
yeah.
really gets in the way. And I feel like using the term damaged is maybe a little negative, but like that's what only word I can think of right now.
But
And
he
just
was
yeah,
like, he was damaged, and he had to undamage himself.
yeah,
He had to recenter himself. Like, I I have major depression disorder, and I get it. And so I can say I'm damaged sometimes. There are some things that will set me off, and it takes me a while to recenter. It takes you a while to find that inner core of who you are again.
yeah.
And I don't think there's anything wrong with being damaged, because we all have we all have like fallible moments, and no
Sure,
one is
sure,
on
sure.
a no
Yeah,
one is on a pedestal. And I think that
absolutely. Yeah.
sometimes we think that damage is the wrong word, but sometimes it's the most appropriate word.
You're so right. Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Because, like, sometimes, like, I've described myself as damaged. I described other people as damaged. And I'm like, oh, is that a negative word? Am I insulting other people by saying it? Because they're like damaged is there's so much connotation for that word. But
Negativity, yeah.
yeah. And it's like so, I guess, pejorative and a really,
Mm-hmm.
it's a way that other people it's a word people use to put other people down, like using the term frigid. I mean, like, don't
Mm-hmm.
like,
Yeah.
but like, yeah, you're absolutely right though. Like sometimes it's just like the right word to use, and it certainly applies to Daniel. But
Yeah.
in the end, like Cameron inspires him to seek treatment. He should have called her because like in the end he goes and seeks
Yeah.
treatment. But like he could have called her and been like, "Hey, I'm at this facility." But you know, he did it, and like at least he
Yeah.
did it. So yeah, and he did it for her. He did it for him. He did it for their future, and it was just like hella romantic, you know.
And like he had been thinking about going into treatment before too. Like you could see it build up in the story.
Mm-hmm.
Like it wasn't just a sudden thing of, oh, this is a plot device. It's something that he was saying. He
Yeah.
was saying, okay, I need to not drink. My job is on the line. I can't keep doing this.
Mm-hmm.
There are limitations to what I can do. And he did the same thing with, his PTSD. He's like, okay, oh crap, I have PTSD. How do I deal with this?
Yeah.
And he was on the way of doing it, and then the plot kind of accelerated up a little bit, so it had to take a back burner. But once the situation was handled, it was okay. I have to fix this.
Mm-hmm.
I have to fix myself so I can be myself.
Yeah. Do you think, like, in a similar way to how being a diabetic was portrayed in this book, like, do you think there was, like, a similar consistency with how people suffer with PTSD was
I
conveyed?
I think so.
Mm-hmm.
I think the only thing I really had that was kind of like a little bit on the negative side to me was I thought that 6 weeks was awful fast for everything he went through.
Sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That I
I
thought
was
so
like,
too. It's like, oh, this is
maybe
something
another
you're gonna
six
have. Yeah.
weeks
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And
because you're also coming off of like being an alcoholic,
yeah.
so you're
Yeah.
going
I
through
was
two
like,
different, mental reroutings there.
I 100% like thought the same thing too. And I was like, okay, well maybe he's gotten like some initial tools to help him get by, including breathing exercises and mindfulness, but then like he's still going to have to do the work once they like move to Florida together and like, you know, seeing a
Exactly.
therapist and other things. So, it's on the up and
So,
up for him for sure.
but I think that and his bonus benefit is I don't want to spoil too much about his past because it's so important, I think, to the plot. But
Yeah, yeah.
I will say that listeners that have issues with war may want to be careful
Yeah.
because it,
Mhm.
it was a little bit um, graphic. I think not in a bad way, but just I mean that it was very like on the page, right? Like
Yeah,
you
yeah.
understood every step he was making in that moment. But
Mhm.
it was really nice to see where his former soldiers were like stepping up for him too.
Mhm. Mhm.
Like they didn't run away because he did what he had to do to make sure everyone was safe.
Yeah. And I feel
And
like yeah,
and
like
they understood that and they stood by him for that.
yeah, and he obviously made the right call in terms of like what happened. But I think like the again like the she does a great job of like dealing with the nuances of guilt. Even if you did the right thing, you have guilt. And I also think like she did a good job of like making sure that like mental illness is an illness. Like it you know like she separates it in a way of
Hmm.
like PTSD isn't his personality. Like PTSD doesn't define him 100%.
It's something that happened to him.
Exactly. And I loved the way, and I really did love the way that was portrayed of he's still this funny guy. He like makes jokes and he's caring, but what he's been through isn't who he is as a person. It was a huge impact of his life.
It it off-centered his life in more ways than one, and he didn't know how to handle it in more ways than one. And
Absolutely,
I
yeah.
think that's valid. Like
Sure, yeah.
I so many of us have that, right? Like we
Mhm.
all have that. I don't know how to handle this, so I'm going to spin for a while because there's no touchstone to keep me from that happening.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I mean, like, and Cam could understand that because she went from being, you know, normal
Mhm.
14-year-old to being diabetic literally overnight.
Yeah.
like her whole world changed. Everything changed, and she admitted to herself, she was like, I didn't like being the center of my parents' attention. I didn't want that attention on me, but I was forced to take it, which can give you, it's very stressful when that happens because people that aren't diabetic try and follow the line, but they
Mm-hmm.
don't understand because they're not feeling it.
Yeah.
Like you can't feel it like the way I can feel it, like when my sugars go down, and I can get mean then. I can get
Yeah.
absolutely cruel because like my brain doesn't function right. It's literally not functioning right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I think that she could understand that in that moment.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And I think that's what bonded them better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Absolutely.
I mean, I to me that was, it was very interesting to see their traumas, and I say trauma because being diagnosed is traumatic.
Yeah. Yeah. And she's
It's
had
life changing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she's had this. I feel like another reason I felt for her is when she was describing what her family had to do when she was around 14 in order to
Yeah.
take care of her. And I feel like that having like a huge familial shift in your dynamic can also affect you in addition to the physical thing. And
You
I
feel
felt,
guilty. You feel really
yeah,
guilty for a
right.
while.
Yeah. Suddenly she, described herself as being, she was either the middle, like maybe the middle child or the youngest child, maybe didn't get the
I
most
think she was,
attention.
yeah, I think she had like
And
3 other siblings.
yeah, and now here she was getting all of this attention. And like, that's huge. It's such a huge thing for a kid. And
And it's something
especially
she
like,
didn't want.
yeah. And especially, I don't know if you read The Babysitter's Club, but
Yep,
Stacy has,
Stacy.
yeah. And I watched the Netflix series and I thought like more so than the books, from what I remember, they did a good job, or an enlightening job for me. I felt
Yep.
enlightened seeing how a kid has to handle being diabetic.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what Cam had to do when she was Stacy's, or maybe a little older than Stacy,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really hard, and I can't imagine being 14 and having it. Like I said, I was
Mhm.
like 22.
Right. Yeah.
I had been sick for years, and I kept asking for help, and doctors didn't see it, so they didn't look at it because what woman knows what she's talking about when she's talking about her medical health.
Sure. Yeah. They
Um,
all, doctors always take women seriously. That's
oh, I know. Let
what
me
they
tell
do.
you.
Yeah.
And so it was a major issue,
Yeah.
and so I understood it. Like I
Mhm.
was like, okay, this makes sense. Like that was something that really stood out, and I think that in the same way, I think Daniel was affected when all eyes were on him, and it was just too much because he went from being part of a unit that no one really talked about too much, like
Mhm.
there was a lot of privacy in that unit, to being all eyes on him, and it was just way too much.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that also pushed him in ways he didn't need to be pushed because there was no longer anyone protecting him. The government wasn't protecting him from that anymore.
Right. Yeah.
And he did it because he had to, but he didn't like it.
Right. Yeah.
And he was already carrying the guilt from everything else, and it was just like it was easy to see why he fell to alcoholism. And I actually appreciated the fact that the author put in the fact that you know, a lot of service members go to alcohol. A lot of
Yeah.
service,
Yeah.
ex-service members, and because I think that people don't always understand how hard it is to transition from one life to another life.
Yeah.
You've been doing this one life for however long you've been doing it, and suddenly you're not doing it anymore,
Mhm.
and how you function is very differently in civilian and military life.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that's something also that made it easy for Cam to recognize, because Cam said, she was like, he's got PTSD, like he's obviously going through something with that dream,
Right.
but she couldn't help him because he wouldn't let her,
Yeah.
because he was too, like, I think she said, like, pig-headed to help him,
Yeah.
or
He
to
is.
get help.
Yeah.
Exactly. But I thought that was really nice the way they recognized it, that it was recognized and mentally acknowledged.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that they can bond with without him realizing they were bonding over it sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
But she could analytically see what was happening.
Yeah. And she's so forthright. Like she doesn't like hide. She's just like tells it like it is, and
Yes.
it's like refreshing to That's why I love her. I love her so
I
much.
I thought she was such a strong character.
Yeah.
Like just strongly defined, strongly laid out, strong to follow along.
Hmm.
And I think she was a really good representation as a diabetic, especially written by someone who is not a diabetic. That's
That's
not easy.
fantastic. I'm so glad that it was written in a way that felt, you know, consistent with your life and other people's lives. I don't know. I'm really glad that there's a book like that. That makes me really happy.
Me too, because I was wondering if there was.
Right.
Because I read a lot of romance, but honestly, I read a lot of historical romance.
Hmm.
That's my safe zone, you
Yeah.
know, like because like when I first started reading, I read Joe Bev. I read Joe
Hmm.
Beverly,
Yeah.
who I loved,
Hmm.
and I'm still so sad that she passed away because I think there was more to her stories that we could have learned.
Right.
Some of the stuff doesn't always transition to now
Yeah.
standards, but she was at least consistently, writing women that had their own agency and their own thought for the most
Yeah.
part.
Hmm.
Maybe not always in ways that I particularly like now, but back then in the like early 2000s, it was phenomenal for me as a
Yeah.
reintroduction to romance.
Sure.
Uh, because I read all my godmother's bodice rippers when I was little, and like Danielle Steele, but I don't consider Danielle Steele romance because everybody dies.
Right. Yeah.
There's no happy ending, so
No.
there is no romance
No, no,
there.
no. Yeah, she's not romance.
But she's often shelved over there, and I'm always confused why. I'm like, do you know how many people die in her book, including the
Well,
woman?
I kind of know why she shelves there.
Oh, I know why she is. It's just,
We do. And
yeah.
it begins with P and it ends with atriarchy.
Yes, exactly. It's like just because she's a woman doesn't mean she's writing
I
romance.
know. It's so weird
I
with like
I would put her
women's
far more
fiction
into, yeah, I was gonna say I'd put her far more into women's fiction or
or like
something,
mystery, or just fiction.
or sometimes even like you could even say historical for some of it, 'cause some
Right.
of it's like
Yeah.
set in World War II and Vietnam and all that kind of
Mhm.
stuff.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But she's definitely not romance to me. But I will say I love bodice tipplers. I
Oh
love when
yeah.
they cover Danielle Steele's books
Uh-huh.
or like Sidney Sheldon's or stuff because that's the stuff I was reading when I was little.
Yeah, yeah.
Because that's what my family had because I didn't really like John Grisham and I didn't really like John Saul. Like those were my
Right.
two choices.
Yeah.
Or like, Tom Clancy. So
Mhm.
my elder godmother, she was the one reading the Bodice Ripper, so I was reading them along with her.
Yeah, I mean that's how so many people fell into romance and it's great.
But it's nice to see, it's nice to see contemporary romances being a little bit more inclusive, even early on. And I think this was the Carina Press, right? I
Yeah.
think so.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, and this must have been right when Carina Press was starting.
Yeah, yeah.
So you can definitely tell that this is part of, I think, Angela James's reign, and you can definitely tell.
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
can definitely tell that like the way she was setting up the press to be looking for stories that maybe other people weren't,
Yeah, absolutely. Looking for new voices, new ways to tell stories. Yeah.
and you didn't have to follow the old school RWA model,
Right. Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
like and I think that helped because I think that actually opened up a lot of um more indie authors that we have now
Yeah.
because we had things like Carina Press out there, right?
Yeah.
We had people that were pushing for this to be a thing,
Mhm.
which was very much like what, Vivian Stevens was doing back in the day too, pushing for more.
Right.
Like there were people that were advocating for the genre to move forward.
Mhm.
And
Absolutely.
and I think that it definitely helped, and I think that, books like this were, I'm not gonna say they're like a foremother for it because I don't think that's what it is, but I think that they were just a good stepping stone of showing that this is what people are wanting, this is what people are buying.
Yeah.
Look at the statistics, look at the numbers, look at the stats, look at who's buying it, look what's buying, like, look what, and what I mean by that is like, are they disabled? Are they a diabetic? Because sometimes people don't consider diabetics to be disabled, which is weird to me
Mhm.
because let me tell you, I got a
Yeah.
disability.
I can tell you, yeah.
Right. But people don't see it because it's invisible.
Right.
So like
Yeah.
sometimes they just kind of like separate us out.
Right.
And so, there's conditions to that. And so it was nice to see kind of the diabetics being pushed back into the disabled section,
Yeah.
honestly. you know,
Absolutely.
the
Yeah.
disabled as in like the impact of it.
Right.
Not
Yeah.
disabled as a person, but like disabled of the impact of what we're reading.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Right.
sometimes I do feel disabled when I'm reading it because I'm like, I am not running 60 miles a day.
Yeah.
I mean, even if I wanted to, my diabetes would not let me.
Right.
Because like there are limitations that come depending on who the people are. Like
Mm-hmm.
every person has a different case of diabetes,
Yeah.
so you don't have that. And so it was nice to be kind of like, oh no, look, we're still part of this group.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
not different. We're not a unicorn. We're not different.
Right. Yeah.
We're in this like and like she has disabilities within in the book. Like there are limitations she has whether she likes it or not. Like she mentions her feet, for instance. That's
Mm-hmm.
something I have to worry about all the time because I've known diabetics that have lost their like up to their knee.
Oh, wow.
Like
Yeah.
gangrene can set in like that on a diabetic.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was glad to see that. I was glad to see that because it is a disability at that point when you're in an area that's very remote, does not have what you need. It's the same thing with someone else who has another disability,
Right.
moves into a place
Absolutely.
that doesn't have it. And
Yeah.
so it was very nice to see you be back in that community of okay, there are disabilities here and there are limitations and it's nice to see this and not to like just, wash over it and just wash it away because it's not convenient for the plot or the
Yeah.
or the romance.
Right.
Like it
Yeah.
can create issues.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was really nice to see included in that.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
I don't know if it wasn't for people like Angela James and other editors at the time that were pushing for that, the buying and the editing and the observations.
Right. Yeah.
Because I don't know if we would have had as many people as we do now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can't go wrong with Karina, I think. Or, I always flock to them to find a new
I
book
like Karina.
sometimes. Yeah.
And because you have like more options.
More
They're
options. Yeah.
they're
New.
traditionally published, but it's more options that you would get necessarily than like a super romance necessarily, right?
Right.
Like
Yeah.
it's a different setup entirely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, I haven't really read it since restructuring happened at Harlequin, so I
Right.
don't know,
Yeah.
but I know that for a long time I really enjoyed Carina Press.
Same. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
And it reminded me a lot of the presses from like the mid 2000s, like
Mm-hmm.
2010, the Tool publishing and stuff like that. Like it reminded me a
Yeah.
lot of that.
Yeah.
The ones that really took the things you couldn't necessarily find. I don't necessarily mean the ones that were kaboom and crazy
Mm-hmm.
town like trying to sue people stuff, but like
Right. Yeah.
the smaller presses, like the ones that weren't quite so big. Because I used to buy those all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Like because back then, like Amazon really wasn't a thing the way it was now. So you'd have to buy them from the companies. You'd have to buy
Yeah.
the ebooks that way. You
Right.
had to buy
Yeah.
them old school. Because like I remember when Laura Lee was not Laura Lee. Like I
Uh-huh.
remember when she was still getting printed in small pressville,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
which is when I started reading the Breed books.
Yeah.
That was special. I've got to read a Breed book with Courtney.
Yeah.
I promised her I'd read a Breed's book because it's been a while since I've read a Breed's book.
Mm-hmm.
But even then there was more there. Like there really wasn't that what I call like dark angel edge to
Yeah. Yeah.
to more mainstream romance.
Uh-huh.
I was like, but y'all had your TV in early 2000s. We all saw how popular Dark Angel was, right?
Right. Yeah.
So it's like, did y'all miss the fact that we were apparently attracted to people that had animal DNA in them, or
Yeah.
did you miss that part with Jensen Ackles?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he wasn't always Eric Brady or Dean
Mm-hmm.
Winchester. He was also Alec.
Yeah.
He was also like half something. I don't remember what his combination were. I just remember that Jessica Alba's character Max had cat DNA because she went into heat.
Right. Yeah. Well, they gotta make her have sex, I guess.
Yeah, right. But like, I mean, but to me, I mentioned that because Laura Lee read like Dark Angel fan fiction to me.
Mm-hmm.
But back then, it was very rare.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it was rare to find that in mainstream.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
indie presses, you could find it, and Karina, I think, kind of bridged that gap
Right. Yeah.
from the indie presses to that. As many of the smaller ones were imploding, Karina was able to take that gap and
Uh-huh.
find them a place that would be a better fit sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And more industry fit and more industry connections when they needed it.
Right. Yeah.
So I've always been like, I was always impressed with Karina, some of the things they have coming out. Because some of the Harlequins I have are Karina's too, the ones that
Mm-hmm.
I bought in the thing.
Yeah.
And because you get people like, I can never say her name, Jeannie.
Oh, I'm
Jeannie
not
Lin.
sure. Oh, maybe.
She writes a lot of Tang Dynasty books.
Mm-hmm.
She's so good, by the way.
Oh, cool. I have to check that out.
I love her. Like I got her book one time because it was just on sale, and I was like, oh, this is different. And I was like, I got it from Harlequin, and I was like, oh,
Yeah.
ha 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 ha. She had a short, The Liar's Dice, out on sale,
Mm-hmm.
but it doesn't necessarily have a happy ending. HEA is it was a novella,
Mm-hmm.
so for an anthology, so it doesn't quite have the same ending.
Right.
But they're later on, they are in the not movie, the book The Hidden Moon, so they kind of jump from there. I think I don't know, but it reminds me a little bit more of Eileen Wilkes had I think it was like Betraying Danger or something like that
Mm-hmm.
in an anthology, and then that became her Lupine World.
Cool.
So it started out as a novella, and then I think it was Berkeley bought it and made it into a series.
Cool.
So I think it's probably a similar setup of that kind of transition from one to the other.
Yeah.
But Lynn is really good. I like her a lot.
Oh, cool. I have to check that out. Yeah.
She's on Twitter too.
Oh, cool.
She's always on Twitter, and I like that because
Oh, yeah.
I learned so much by Twitter. Like
Mhm.
Twitter romance is amazing.
Mhm.
I can never stop saying that. That's why I always say at the end that Twitter is where I'm usually at because I learn more that way.
Right, of course. Yeah, that's how I get like all my romance novel news.
And who to avoid sometimes.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Like I don't want to pay for some people. You know?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I'm like, I've learned some stuff.
Mhm.
Like one of my favorite authors I can't promote anymore. So
Yeah.
I'm like,
It
that kind of
happens.
sucks, but I was like, because I promoted her like 4 episodes ago,
Uh-huh.
5 episodes, but I mean, sometimes you have to reevaluate,
Yeah.
which is why Twitter is really good for that, I think.
Of course, yeah. Kind of exposes things and yeah.
There's so many own voices within romance Twitter that you really learn
Mhm. Mhm.
along the way,
Yeah.
and I think that's really good for me.
Absolutely. It's good for everyone.
Again, Whitey McWhite, white.
Yeah.
Because I won't understand. I don't understand necessarily the same paths and the same experiences, and so by following them, you learn more.
Right. Yeah.
Like I've learned so much more by reading books, by listening on Twitter, by just what's being retweeted and why, and I'm just like, oh, this makes more sense now.
Yeah. Yeah.
I miss that. I miss that entirely.
Yeah.
Might be. But yeah, I think that Toni did a really good job of kind of setting up what you can expect in modern, not
Yeah.
modern, but modern contemporary.
Absolutely. And like suspense.
It's so hard to
yeah.
call it contemporary because it's like it was contemporary 20 years ago.
I know.
So
I still consider it. Well,
Yeah.
I consider it romantic suspense, but yeah, it's still contemporary, I think.
Yeah, but like it's nice to have that kind of expectation of, because like the last romantic suspense I'd read was like one of the purple ones from Harlequin about 10 years ago.
Uh-huh.
Wasn't that suspense?
Yeah,
Wasn't
Harlequin
that suspense?
Intrigue, I think. Was it
Yeah,
Intrigue? Yeah.
I think it was Intrigue.
Mhm.
I read a lot of those because like what the library had is what I read. I also read a lot of Penny Jordan and Emma Darcy back in the day.
Mhm.
We had a lot of those.
Cool.
My library system had a lot of those.
Yeah.
I think it was like 2 years ago. I retweeted an Emma Darcy. Like I did a live tweeting of reading an Emma Darcy when it was set. I think it was Emma Darcy. It was set in Australia.
Yeah. Cool.
It wasn't intrigue, but I was intrigued by how this was going to play out.
Exactly. Listen, they all should be called Harlequin Intrigue.
Especially when you're just like, I don't understand this book at all.
Right. Yeah.
I don't understand how it got made. I don't understand how A to B to C to D. I don't get how they got there. So can I? But yeah, I mean, it was a very like flabbergasting book.
Mm-hmm.
It was good. I mean, it was well written. It was just the plot line was very flabbergasting to me.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes they're just like wild, and you're like, what? But yeah.
You're just like, but how though? Why?
Yeah.
Because I remember, because like I said, I used to go to thrift stores, and so I'd grab all these books, and I was just like, okay, we can run with this. I suppose we can do this.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'm glad to see that there is more out there.
Yeah, that's great.
Because it's not something that I usually read.
Right. Well, I'm glad you did. This is opening yourself up. I mean, I love reading new genres too and discovering new things. And yeah.
Oh, I also want to say, like, I really appreciated your episode with tea and strumpets because I listen to them all the time.
Oh, cool.
But I appreciated it because it was like, it was another one of those things that I hadn't really paid attention to.
Mm-hmm.
So I was glad, and that's another reason I bring it up, because I was glad that you were so on board with this book.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, because like sometimes our tastes don't always match up
on
what we review.
Mm-hmm.
But it's always really nice when people that I respect like the book that I like.
Oh yeah, sure. I love gushing over books for sure, and yeah. It's fun.
I know. I've listened to many of your episodes.
Well,
I've been like every time I've had to change my different podcast listening things, but like you're always on wherever I change, you're always on it. So.
Oh, good. Oh, I'm glad. Yeah. Well, that's so sweet. Thank you.
Like I said, you and I and Kelly all started at the same time, so I tend to like those are some of my three, well, my two, but
we're the triumvirate.
Yeah, exactly. But like I was always really glad to see, because all three of us are very different. We talk about it very, very different ways, and we started at the same time, so we can see just how diverse how we process books and how we see them differently.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's what's just so great about the fact that there's so many different romance novel podcasts now, and they're all so different, and it's great. And
there's like such a wide variety.
Yeah.
Of just the sheer hosting of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like how we all do it differently.
Yeah, I mean, it's a testament to the hosts too, of just like we all have different voices and different ways of experiencing books and how we feel and how we buy, and I think it's so great.
Exactly. And I think that's kind of what strengthens us as well, because like you've got the bigger names, the middle names and the smaller names, but we all kind of connect at certain points.
Yeah.
And I think that's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Because like the first really big podcast I ever listened to for romance was Heaving Bosoms.
Yeah.
But I listened to it because back when Smart Bitches had their Heaving Bosoms book published, I actually used it in a paper I wrote for
cool.
my English composition class.
Oh, cool.
And so Heaving Bosoms, I was like, is that them? I was like, no, that's not Sarah. But I was like, but
yeah,
I like their snark. And then, it was just really interesting seeing how different, like, you're nothing like Aaron or Melody, but you're you.
Right, yeah, and you're you. Yeah.
Exactly. And so, like, we're all very independent of each other, but we all have the love of the same genre.
Exactly, yeah.
And I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I
You
agree.
don't always get that in fandoms. A
Yeah.
lot of times you can get some, man, my fandoms when I was in fandom was like Pop Slash
Mhm.
back in the day.
Yeah.
And then I was like Buffy,
Sure.
Harry Potter, and Stargate Atlantis. So there was
Yeah.
a lot of infighting in those particular
Oh, yeah.
fandoms.
And there
So
isn't a lot of infighting in romance, which is just so nice, you know.
yeah, like as a fandom, a lot of us are very aware of each other.
Yeah.
Like we're aware of and promote each other.
Mhm.
Like even if it's not a podcast, it can be a reviewer or it can be someone like that.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
Jen Ellens is always talking to me, and she doesn't have a podcast, but she listens and she is always giving me something smart as feedback. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
really nice how we kind of like promote each other and kind of give each other a some kind of appreciation,
Totally. Yeah.
because so many people on like the world may not, even
Right.
though we're huge.
But we have each other, and I think that's what's
Exactly.
important.
Exactly. And that's
Yeah.
why we're a cool community, and that's why I like talking to our community.
Yeah, exactly. Agreed.
Even if they're community members from other parts.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But it's just been really nice to talk to you
Oh,
and
same.
to
This was delightful. I had so much fun. Oh my God. Yeah, this was so, it was nice to find, like, I mean, we've tweeted at each other and it's nice to finally, like,
for like 2 years. Yeah.
yeah, to like, I want to say meet you in person, but we're not in person, but it was nice to like hear your voice and talk. And, you know, this was so much fun.
It's close enough. It counts. Okay, guys. So I want to say thank you for listening. And I very sillily forgot to ask Becky to talk about where you can find her podcast. So I'm going to fix that right now. Too Stupid to Live, the podcast. You can be found at tstlpodcast.com. And you can also find it on Twitter at tstlpodcast. That's kind of where I know the podcast the most because I interact with Becky the most, but it's definitely worth listening to. Everything is like $4.99 and under, and you can listen to a bunch of different authors, guests. You can find a lot of really interesting information there, and I definitely want to promote her for that because Becky is awesome. Now, here's where you can find Deconstructing Damsels, my podcast. You can find it at damselspodcast.com. You can also find it on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Damsels Podcast as well. I really don't interact on Facebook or Instagram much right now. I honestly don't really understand it. Sorry. But you can definitely find me on Twitter. You can also find me at patreon.com/damselspodcast if you want to join. I have a few more episodes coming up soon on different topics, including some with my husband I'm going to record. If you guys want to like email me, check out damselspodcast@gmail.com. Seriously, as easy as I can make it for you guys. If you guys want to buy some merch, you can go to threadless.com/user/damselspodcast on brand. And you can find books. Well, you can write in books anyway. You can find t-shirts, you can find magnets, pins, stickers, and each of the designs are exclusive to each little section. So some have got the heart with the pink, others have got, just the basic design, others have a little bit of the old logo. You take a look, you want it. Also, if you go to bodybookworms.com/damsel69, you can get $6 off an order, and I highly recommend it because there's a lot of thought put together in the project, and I think the project is definitely worth talking about. Thank you so much for listening. I really enjoyed the time that Becky took with me, and I enjoyed the conversations, and I wanted just to give a shout out to everyone that's helped put this episode together, including my husband, Sven, Creature, whichever we're going to call him, but I appreciate the fact that he took the time to edit this. Not exactly the shortest thing in the world to edit, but talking books. It's fun! Okay, I will see you guys. Well, no. I will talk to you guys next time at the end of the month, because as you know, it's like a every other week podcast. And in that one, Sven and I will be on, and we will be watching a romantic comedy from the 1950s. That should be interesting. And no, it's not my favorite of How to Marry a Millionaire. That we will be watching again, and we'll be putting on Patreon sometime in the next month. Okay, guys. Bye. I mean, like, I put on clothes for you. I'm not in my pajamas. We met.
Oh, I'm dressed up. I put on a necklace, so I mean, I'm not wearing
Ooh.
anything else. But no, I'm kidding. But yeah.
Well, I mean, as long as you know it's something that a French girl could wear, you're fine.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm definitely real French today.
Yeah. See, I I have on my Wonder Woman shirt.
Ooh, fun.
Yeah, I got it from Tor. It's like 12 years ago, and it's got holes everywhere, but it's still very comfortable, and they're not very noticeable holes. So I
Oh
wear
yeah,
them
my
whenever I
shirt has
can.
holes in it too. That's just where we're at right now.
Yeah, I mean, like it's my comfortable I'm at home shirt. I didn't go anywhere today,
Yeah, great.
but I put on pants for you now.
Oh my God, I'm so honored. So
You
honored.
should be.
Yeah,
There are many days I don't put on pants, so this is a big
same.
deal.
Yeah, I'm very
Usually I have on
honored.
my PJ pants or I have on my boxer shorts or something, but no, you got full
Oh, I
pants.
got full pants. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, you got jeans.
Whoa, that's pants. Now those are
Yeah.
pants.
Yeah, yeah, I dressed up for you. I'm even wearing my llama socks.
Oh,
I got them from
listen,
the Dollar Tree.
that's great. I'm so touched. You have no idea.
You should be.
I am. Yeah. Don't worry. I am.
I was like, you may not see me, but by golly, you can know that I'm wearing
And I
clothes for
really
you.
did hear from your voice. I was like, she's wearing jeans for sure.